Hi, my name is Olga Evenden and I am an abstract artist living and working in Dublin in Ireland. My background in formal training is in graphic design. So I studied visual communications in TU in Dublin. However, I'm currently working as an abstract painter and also a teacher of art and design related subjects in further education college. I began painting after I'd given birth to my second child. I felt I'd become very disconnected from myself, and like all new mums, I wondered who I was and what had I done before breastfeeding and changing nappies. And I remember sitting up and telling my partner my lifelong dream was always to be a working artist, and so I just kind of decided to make that happen. I always wanted to paint, and I was drawn to abstraction as a way to work from my heart rather than my head. In graphic design, you're very much working from your head, and I just needed to work more from my heart. I come from a very creative family. Our house is full of painting and music, fashion, stained glass, all different types of arts and crafts, basically. And from my earliest memory, I can only ever remember wanting to go to art college. So from the age of around 3 or 4, I've always wanted to draw and paint. Not that I knew about art college at that stage, but I always wanted to draw and paint. I was given a lot of space and encouragement during my younger years to do this, and I was always handed, paper and pencils and crayons. And I just kind of knew very, very early on that that's how I wanted to live my life, was just being creative. But when I kind of got to the age of choosing which way to go, I was an unusually kind of savvy and practical teenager. And I kind of knew that there was 2 paths to take. One was like financial security, where you kind of are very employable. And the other one, where you would have to kind of freelance and really kind of graft to make your way in a kind of a less laid out path. So as a teenager, when it came to deciding which route to go down, whether to go down design or to go down the fine art route, I was offered both courses. So I kind of had a choice to make. And I had been doing a year kind of foundation course where I'd been drawing and painting every day and also experimenting with some designs. But although I loved to do drawing and painting, I knew that the side of my personality, which needed a lot of kind of stability and kind of security, I chose to go with the kind of more practical course, which was the visual communications course. And to be honest with you, it served me very well. It did afford me that kind of security which I was looking for. But I am happy now, having kind of achieved some level of security, that I'm free to really throw myself into the kind of freelance artist side of myself. I think my formal training in design has had a huge impact on who I am as an artist today. Although the 2 disciplines are very different, obviously, in the motivation and purpose, they deal with a lot of the same issues. For instance, they both kind of have a commonality with composition, colour palette, dealing with negative space, texture, contrast, line, and also visual messaging. So all these challenges that you face as a graphic designer, you also face as a fine artist as well. It's a bit more complex than that, obviously, we know, but in terms of actual visual elements, a lot of the same issues apply to both disciplines. So to use a very business phrase, there's lots of transferable skills between the 2 disciplines, I think. And certainly working as a graphic designer has definitely influenced my work. And also a funny kind of way, as a graphic designer, you're very controlled and everything's very kind of, or tends to be orderly, unless you're working in a kind of a very David Carson grunge grunge-like style, but a lot of it is very kind of orderly and trying to make sense and clarity and all of that. So very much in my painting, I try to reject that, funny enough. So a lot of the paintings that I create are I'm trying to find a balance. I'm trying to find symmetry, but in a very unexpected way. So I like things to be a little bit raw and disordered in my painting. So that, I think, is a kind of a contrast to how I worked as a graphic designer. I made the transition to move away from graphic design and move into teaching. Initially, as I was kind of getting burnt out with the kind of very heavily commercial aspect of the graphic design world, I just needed to do something that was a little bit more self-fulfilling. And I just felt I needed a break from all of that. So teaching was something that really appealed to me and has served me really well. And I really enjoy working as a teacher. It's something that has definitely shaped who I am as an artist. I've always been fascinated with abstraction, in particular with the post-World War II artists involved in the New York school. I'd say that they would be my biggest influences and a kind of a reference point. I find myself mostly being moved by the kind of female artists of that group. I'm always focusing on myself and trying to stay internally orientated. It's so easy as an artist to look around and judge your progression and growth merely by your achievements and accolades. Of course, this is not the correct way to measure your growth, so I try and remind myself of that all the time. With regards to my work, and I'm always trying to develop my style, and I see this as a continuous work in progress. One of the main things about my process and my progress is that I try and remove the idea that anyone will ever be looking at the work. I find myself sometimes restricted by that, and I kind of find myself falling into how will it look to other people rather than how does it look to me. And for this reason, I never do commissions. And from a very early stage in my painting career, I decided that I would never, ever take on a commission. I'm standing by that, and I'm very happy about that decision. As an artist, you come across so many challenges, but I think my biggest challenge for me personally has always been my health and also managing my time. I'm a mum, and having a young family and working from home can sometimes be difficult. You have to be really, really disciplined to ensure you maximise the time that you have available. And in terms of my health, I had a very serious kind of endocrine issue in my 20s, which wasn't diagnosed for a long, long time. And I've also just been recently diagnosed with inattentive type ADHD. And with the kind of health conditions, I found that really, really, really kind of took away any creative ability because I just didn't have the resources to deal with it. All my time and energy was going into kind of just surviving and make myself try to just feel healthy and feel well. So I think it's really unfortunate that it's, your talent and your ability can be so disrupted when you're not feeling at your best. So I think with the kind of endocrine issues that I had, that really was a creative killer. And with regards to the ADHD, unusually, I wouldn't change a thing about that, although that has also been very, very difficult to manage. And, it brings a lot of kind of masking and a lot of anxiety and a lot of kind of pressure because you're trying to, present yourself in a very kind of together manner. But internally you feel, for me, I felt very spacey, a little bit kind of dreamy and, forgetful and memory issues and things like that. But there is an advantage of having ADHD, and that is the hyper focus. And for me, I really, really, really have an ability to hyper focus. So I wouldn't change a thing about having ADHD. And I see it as a real benefit to my work life, because once I'm focused on something, that's it. I am focused, and it's actually something that's really worked in my favour. So yeah, I think those are the two things that have really challenged me as an artist. My health, time, and also having ADHD. Although in one way it's really helped me. Gosh, there's so much advice I would give to my younger self. My 20s, as I just said, were a really challenging time for me. And I had a lot of serious health conditions which took a long time to settle down and to be sorted. And throughout this period, as I was saying, it really suffered with a lot of major creative block. And with the creative block, then you kind of doubt yourself and you doubt your abilities and you doubt everything. So I think that was really, hard to handle, kind of feeling like I have something inside but not being able to access it. So I think I'd just give myself, my younger self, a big hug and say, hang in there and wait. Everything will start to flow again. And yes, you are creative. And yes, you do have a job to do and it'll come back. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm experimental with my techniques. At times I try, I'm fairly straightforward in how my work is created. I mean, I use acrylic paint and I paint on canvas, so there's nothing experimental or unconventional about any of that. But I do kind of like my work to have an almost weathered or distressed look to it, and it's all in an attempt to kind of create this rawness and this unpolished, unfinished work. So I often will apply paint, and then when it's dry I'll remove it by washing it off again, scrubbing at it, and this kind of, I suppose, is not very conventional. So in terms of like, have I tried unconventional mediums or techniques? Not especially, but I do at times kind of remove weather and use old canvases, rework old canvases, things like that. I always have some sort of audio playing in the background, and whether it's a podcast, the radio, or an album, I find I have to have something on while I paint. I just find I focus more and I get more work done when I have some sort of noise on in the background. I listen to all different types of music. I love, literally probably every type of music except for country music. It's not my thing. Also things like, death metal, banging techno, something like that. But generally I'm kind of open to most types of music. It's funny, as an artist, I've had people who absolutely love my work, and I've also had people look at it and just ask, what is it? It doesn't look like anything. I find it hysterical that people still must misunderstand what art is supposed to do. And so many people still have that kind of really outdated understanding of art, and they judge it and understand it purely from a representational viewpoint. So many people, I think, that maybe aren't necessarily involved in the art world, they're expecting a kind of a traditional type of art that is representational in some point. So they'll judge it basically on the skill of the artist and whether they are able to paint realistically, or, obviously a photorealist would be a kind of what they're thinking is like the pinnacle of being an artist. So I think still a lot of people still judge by skill level as a draftsman, rather than like having a kind of a creative vision or seeing something new or seeing something different. So I think, it's funny. I've had, as an abstract artist, I think anyone who paints in abstract is familiar with that kind of very confused look that some people have on their face when they're looking at blobs of colour. And I think that's why I love the New York school. Just they had that bravery and they had that like vision to just see something fresh and new. And it started with Kandinsky, and they were able to just kind of go with it and stay internally focused and just do what they felt was right. I would like for people to have an emotional reaction to my work. I think for an abstract artist, you really have to tap into your internal dialogue, your internal experiences, in order to produce genuine abstract work. And I think that I'd like for people to have the same kind of reaction when they're looking at the piece, which is that they're tapping into some kind of emotional internal experience that they're having themselves to the paintings. I like the idea of the Stendhal syndrome, but I'm not sure I really am in favour of people passing out or anything like that. But I do find it fascinating that artwork can move you and take your breath away. And I would like for people to have been touched in some way by the paintings I create. My website is www.olgaevenden.com, and my Instagram profile is at Olga Evenden _art, and I have a Facebook page which is Olga Evenden Art.